All right, here we go. We are back and excited to be with you. I have a great guest I'm going to bring on in just a minute. Before I do that, I had an absolute amazing time last week at the FETC event, the Future of Educational Technology event. I had a chance to meet our sponsors, Bulb and Swivel, in person. We had a dinner. We brought everybody together, and let me tell you, getting back together is fabulous. We laughed, we talked, we were safe, and we had a great time collaborating, building those partnerships, and being stronger together. K-12 leaders, they are also there. Make sure to check them out at k12leaders.com. All of these amazing partnerships help us to become stronger and to become better together. And I'm going to bring on our next guest. And it's actually interesting because one of our sponsors, Swivel, was the reason that we were able to next bring on Brandon Perry, all the way from a little bit south of Massachusetts, where I'm coming from. So, Brandon, welcome to the Stronger Together experience. And where are you coming in from?
Yes, thank you so much. This is awesome. So I'm joining in from Virginia, which is it's been a dreary, rainy day here today after some snow the past month.
Awesome. And what do you do in Virginia besides hiking and
So
all these fun things I see you do online?
yeah, so I teach seventh and eighth grade history, and I also coach mainly boys lacrosse. Our season will be starting here the end of February, which is great. I'm a native of Virginia. I've been teaching, this is my 10th year now. Um, I taught for 5 years at another school in Virginia. And then my wife's job actually took us down to Georgia for a few years. I taught down there. And then we just recently moved back to Virginia back in December of 2020.
Awesome. So I mentioned Swivel because I think you entered like this contest when the book Power of Connections, and you ended up winning it. Is that correct? Is that how that started?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty crazy story. Last spring, I've had Twitter for quite a while, but last spring I randomly, just started kind of exploring more into kind of the educational world of Twitter, which is pretty extensive and in a great
Right.
way. And yeah, so I kind of stumbled upon, a few companies and Swivel was one of them, and they were giving a book away. And yeah, I entered into like their contest and I got the book, and it was Your Power of Connections. And it was so great because it's kind of like pushed me so far forward in like all I've learned so far since that was like late spring, early summer. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's been so cool. I've connected with so many people. I mean, I've learned so many new things, even with lessons that I've been, teaching this year, and resources. And, it's so inspiring in the sense, especially when I'm having a tough day and I jump on there and I see, everybody talking about, inspirational stories or stuff that's going on. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think then you took that and you jumped into the Codebreaker Lounge one time, and you started to meet other folks. I think that was one of our first times that we had a chance to meet.
Yeah, it was super cool. And it was kind of interesting because, like I said, I started kind of dabbling and, in a way, kind of taking a risk. And for me, I'm kind of inherently an introverted person, so I never had done things like that. And so yeah, one day I told my wife, I was like, "This is kind of this interesting lounge tonight. I'm just going to jump on and see what happens." And I did, and here we are, and it's been an awesome connection since.
Yeah, but and I don't want to take anything away, like just like, oh, here we are, we got lucky, you did this. It always drives me nuts when people say, oh, you're so lucky you get to do X. You also took it upon yourself to then start participating in more chats. I saw you apply to be a Codebreaker ambassador. I think you ran or were a major part of one of the swivel chats, relationships. Like, what did you do that you're like, this is something I want to start to embrace? Talk to us about that, because that's where that stronger together mindset is. It's like, okay, you just said you're an introvert, but now I'm going to put myself out there to this global professional learning network.
Yeah, and so to be totally honest and super transparent, I think the past 2 years for lots of educators have been tough. And for me as well, in a sense of it's just, things can seem very overwhelming as we've kind of navigated through the pandemic. And I sensed myself kind of inching towards this mode of burnout or just kind of frustration and overwhelm. And so I wanted to change things up and try to kind of mix up the energy. And so that's what led me into exploring more on Twitter and connecting with others, jumping onto that Codebreaker Lounge. And I realized that the more I put myself out there and the more I connected with others, the more inspired I became, and the more kind of that passion and love I have for education kind of like bubbled back up. And so I think that's the coolest part is the more I do it, the more that passion kind of like spills over. And I'm such a believer that energy is so contagious. We see that in our classroom every day. If you come in super positive and upbeat, the students feed off that. And so
Right, right.
I've tried to emulate that in my experiences, in the sense of the more I can just take that risk and put myself out there and be authentic and try these new things, I connect with others, and hopefully I can, show others that, it's super easy to do and there's so much to benefit from it. I mean, I think last spring, I only had like 60 followers on Twitter. And not that it's about the followers, but it's like my connections have grown so much since then that like I just, I'm bouncing back and forth between so many cool things on Twitter especially.
No, and I think that's critical. And just for the record, I didn't call or ask Brandon to come on to pump up the book or pump up the connections. You've exuded that, and for those of you who haven't read The Power of Connections, the E in power. Power is an acronym about building the foundation of connections, and E is engage, and you've done that. And even this experience, you signed up. I didn't go search for you. You're like, I want in. What you've said you've never done a live podcast like this. You really haven't done a lot of external podcasts or things. What made you say like this is? I'm just going to jump right in. What? Tell me about that.
Yeah, and so it's funny, when I saw you had posted this idea of this stronger together experience, I was so intrigued of thinking, what is this? Sounds so cool. And I watched the first few and I was like, this is awesome. I got to sign up and put myself out there again. And I think it's a lot of, Codebreaker emulates this too, this aspect of risk taking. And I think the more we put ourselves out there in just a natural, organic way, the more we can grow as people. And
Right.
that sphere of comfort and that comfort zone is different for everybody. And for me, it was initially pretty small in the sense of being a quiet, introverted, person inherently. And I just realized the more I put myself out there and force myself to do these things, the more I grow, and ultimately can become a better educator for it.
Awesome. And as Brandon was saying, here's his Twitter handle. Follow him. Check it out. See all the great things he's doing. And I just want to touch on the last thing you said there and dive into that. It says, made you a better educator. How have all of these experiences, bringing people together, participating in chats, helped you in your classroom be a better educator with your students?
Yeah, so a lot of ways. So there's so many layers to it. I think number one, the easiest is just access to resources. Sometimes teachers,
Hmm.
we get stuck and, it's hard to find material. And so I think through those connections, people are always sharing like, hey, this is an awesome lesson on this, or check this out, look at this template. So I think that's been an awesome piece. I also, I love the element of inspiration. If I'm having a tough day or I feel overwhelmed or struggling, and I jump on Twitter and I can connect with someone or see something, a story they're talking about, it kind of, brings that passion back, and I can kind of push through the rest of my day. And it's also ultimately given me more confidence. And, I think early in my teaching career, my approach was, especially my first year, super transactional and just kind of like
Hmm.
by the book, here's how we do it. And I learned, very early on that doesn't work very well with students, especially middle schoolers. They smell that a mile away. So I learned that the more I be myself and am authentic, the better off the class whole experience is. And all of these connections have really kind of brought that confidence back in me, and I go into my class every day super excited with it. And even sometimes I'll tell them cool things I pick up on, that's going on in kind of the world of education, and they find that interesting.
Yeah, and it makes it relevant. It makes them think you're kind of cool, and like, oh wow, look at our teacher. Look at Mr. Perry. He's all, you know, hashtag this, and it's awesome. So I'm psyched for you, and that really, I don't want that to get lost in here. That you put yourself out there, you took that risk, and having that has expanded your, professional connections, expanded some of the things you've been doing. And speaking of expanding some of the things that you've been doing, I also read a little bit about this Blue Skies EDU. Well, so tell us about what this is.
Yeah, so it's really an idea, something I came up with last summer, and I've been kind of toying with it throughout the fall. I just recently, my wife and I had our first child in the fall, so we've been a little busy with that and trying to catch up on sleep. But yeah, this is something I came up with last summer, and this idea of blue skies is very personal for me. I lost my mom in 2011, and one of the things she always said to me was hoping for blue skies and calm waters. And it's always just been this kind of calming phrase and a very peaceful sentiment to me. And so, on tough days, especially, I always kind of, that's my mantra, blue skies, calm waters. And so I think that, last summer I was thinking, as we're navigating this new world of education, and sometimes can be turbulent, with lots of storms, I always think blue skies. And so that's kind of where the name came from. And what I'm hoping it to be is a few different things. One, I actually completed my master's in December of 2020 in instructional coaching.
Okay.
And so I have been kind of toying with ways to become more involved with that. And I think it's such an awesome avenue, and it connects with a lot of what you're talking about, in the sense of, we as teachers are truly better together. And I think sometimes, people think of coaches and instructional coaches as, observing and coming in and tell you what to do. But in reality, it really is just a partnership. It's a way to co-plan or to co-teach a lesson, or to brainstorm, or to collect data on students and figure out your next lesson.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about it. And that's kind of like a new angle I got a glimpse into through my program. And I realized early in my career, I never, quite had a coach in my teaching. And so my first few years were very tough, as most teachers are. And so I
Right.
kind of figured it out as I went. And I just think it's such a powerful idea of finding ways to offer that and connect with teachers, and collaborate and find ways that we can connect schools in different parts of the country, and ultimately improve that student experience. So that's kind of what I'm toying with, figuring out how that works. And then I've also been blogging a little bit. It goes back to kind of what you said, just
Yep.
putting myself out there and writing some stuff. And I told my wife when I wrote the first one, like I said, I told her she might be the only one that ever reads it, but here it goes. I'm going to write it anyway. So
No, and I think that's important as someone who's written, some books and articles. I always encourage people just to start, just to go. And as you said, if just your wife reads it, then it's worth doing it. And but what it does is makes you a better writer, makes you get your thoughts out. It starts to get that avenue of sharing, and before you know it, more people are going to read it. And it's not about that; it's about you internalizing your own learning and getting it out there. So I encourage you to keep going at it. I encourage you to keep putting your thoughts out there, and it's good to get that authentic feedback. And but
right.
at the same point, it's not easy to do that, right? It's like, oh, I'm giving up a little bit of myself here.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So you were talking about coaching, and you're talking about, teacher experiences. What would be for any new educator watching this, or a senior in college this year looking to get into the field as a coach? What would be something you would say, this is what you really need to do to start off your teaching career?
I think super simple. I think be authentic, be who you are. Don't try to be anybody else. And we hear this a lot, but it's so true to its core. Ultimately, just focus on the relationship aspect of the school community. Work on connecting with students in a genuine way, connect with your colleagues, connect with the parents of the students you teach. And I think the better you can create that foundation of those relationships and connections, ultimately, the better educator you are. The students are more attuned to your lesson. The parents are more receptive to feedback and collaborating with their student experience. Your colleagues have a better chance of working together and working on cross-curricular stuff. So I think that's the biggest foundation piece. And if you can, any new teacher can figure that out early on, all of the other stuff, will fall into place as you go.
That's awesome. Now I'm going to push you a little bit, because one of the hardest part about being a coach, and as you said, you've been in the field, so 10 years, you're probably 31, 32 in there somewhere, and you coach a veteran teacher who has 25 years experience, and here you come in. How do you start that relationship with a veteran teacher where you are now tasked to coach them to improve? What would you advise coaches who are starting to get into the coaching field to coach veteran teachers?
Yeah, so I think, and that's a tough thing because, as coaches, right, you're shifting more into adult learning, right? Especially if you've been in the classroom and you're working with students, you're shifting into that adult realm. And so I think just like with your students, you have to have the ability to differentiate. And I think first, like I've always said, it starts with that relationship, and it has to be done in such an organic way. And you can't force it, you can't make it happen. You just have to naturally find a way to connect and build that initial relationship, because you have to have an element of trust in place, because without the trust, it's not going to work. And I think one of the biggest strengths is you shift the focus on not how to coach that individual to be a better teacher, but on keep it as a student experience and focused on the students and their learning, and say, hey, what are some ways you want to improve the student experience? And ultimately, then that opens the doorway for how can we collaborate? I can just be an extra person in the room. Maybe you just need help gathering some data. Maybe you need help with the tech, and I can just kind of like hang out in the room. That way it's not super intimidating, and it shifts the focus away from, here, I'm going to tell you how to teach and this is what you need to do. It's more about the students and, hey, how can we improve their education and experience?
Awesome. And everything you've talked about today for the 18 minutes we've been here, from the power of connections to working together and putting yourself out there to coaching, is all really threaded around this stronger together mindset. So when I ask you, what does it mean to be stronger together? What does that mean to you?
Well, I think right now in education, it is more meaningful than it's probably ever been. As we as educators are navigating so many different realms and obstacles and things through this school year and the past few years, I think the only path forward and the best path forward is our ability to ultimately be stronger together and to connect together. And that is how we can navigate these challenges and brainstorm and collaborate, um, and ultimately shift education to the place that we all know it can and should be. And I think if we can focus on those connections and ultimately be stronger together, then we can propel education in that direction.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for coming on. You made it through your first live podcast experience. How you feeling? You recharged? You excited?
Yes, this is awesome. Usually I'm asleep by now because I've been following my son's schedule, but yeah, I'm like ready to go. I'm gonna do some like lesson planning or something. Like,
All
this was
right.
awesome.
Look at that. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. Make sure to follow Brandon, follow Blue Skies EDU. And for all of our viewers out there watching live or watching after the fact as it's posted on our website, thank you for tuning in. Stay stronger together, because we are better when we put we over me.